All right, let's begin with page 14. When you are solving a word problem using a proportion, be sure to line up the units. Notice again that units are going to play an important part. It's very easy to set these up incorrectly if you aren't paying attention. So quantities with the same units should be in the same ratio, or the way that we will do it is should be in the same side of the fraction bar if they have the same units. Be sure to write the units with the numbers to avoid making careless mistakes. It would be a shame for you to do all the math correctly, but because you set up the problem wrong, you end up with an incorrect answer. There are multiple ways to set up the proportion and solve it. However, each one's going to have the same cross products and resulting equations. So you and your best friend may set it up differently, but you should still have the same cross products and the same resulting equations. You must include the units on the answers to make sure that we find what we're being asked for. Notice the word units is on here a lot, so it's probably something important. Let's take a look at the first example on page 15. Carol spends 17 hours in a 2-week period practicing her culinary skills. How many hours does she practice in 5 weeks? So we should note that we have hours, weeks, how many hours in 5 weeks. So our two units are going to be hours and weeks. It doesn't matter which one you put on top and which one you put on bottom. I usually like to put them in the order that I read the problem. So when we read it, Carol spends 17 hours. It's hours, so it needs to go up top. In a 2-week period. So that's 17 hours in 2 weeks. Those two units, those two quantities go together. 17 hours in 2 weeks. Problem tells us that. How many hours? So that tells us the variable we're looking for. Does she practice in 5 weeks? So now that we have set up our proportion, we can go through and we can solve it the way that we solved the proportions from last night. 2 times h equals 17 times 5. 2h equals 85. H is going to equal 85 divided by 2. And we get that h is going to equal 42.5 hours. We know it's going to be hours because look where the missing unit is. The missing quantity. It's up top for hours. We are asked how many hours does she practice? We've solved the problem correctly. Let's take a look at number 2. Joseph drives 125 miles in 2.5 hours. At that same rate, how far will he be able to travel in 6 hours? So let's locate our units. Joseph drives 125 miles in 2.5 hours. At that same rate, how far will he be able to travel in 6 hours? So those units are going to be what we use to help us set up the problem. So we're talking about miles compared to hours. Again, doesn't matter. In the top one I put hours on top, and the next one I put hours on the bottom. Does not matter. So Joseph drives 125 miles, and we want to include our units so we make sure it goes on the correct side of the fraction bar or the ratio bar, and he does it in 2.5 hours. Now I'm someone that doesn't like fractions, as I know that a lot of you don't, so we're going to go ahead and put it in decimal, 2.5 hours. And we want to know, at that same rate, how far will he be able to travel in 6 hours? So we can fill in 6 hours. We know where it's going to go. Again, they told us 125 miles in 2.5 hours. We know those two quantities go together, so that's the first ratio. We're asked how far. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, will miles tell us how far he went? The answer is yes. So we can fill in our variable that we're looking for, which is m. Now we can go and solve our problem the way we did last night. 2.5 times m equals 125 times 6. 2.5, it's a decimal, m equals 750. M is going to equal 750 divided by 2.5. Now, if you wanted to leave it as 2.5 throughout the whole problem, go for it, but I know y'all don't like fractions, so feel free to convert it to a decimal. And we end up finding out that it is 300 miles. We need to include our units. We know it's going to be miles because our variable is m. It's located in the miles part of the ratio. And now we need to say, is 300 miles an answer to how far he can travel? The answer is yes. So our answer is 300 miles. Now on to number 3, which is going to start where the problems get a little trickier. To determine the number of deer in the forest, a forest ranger tags 280 and releases them back into the forest. Later, 405 deer are caught, out of which 45 of them are tagged. Estimate how many deer are in the forest. Let me just address the reason it says estimate. There's no way to calculate the actual number of deer in the forest. So that's why they said estimate, because they want you to understand you're not going to be able to calculate the exact number. Now when we do this, all of the units are referring to deer. So if we were to write the word deer over deer, that's not going to be very helpful. But what will be helpful is we're talking about the number of deer that are tagged, and you'll notice it appears twice. And then we have this number of deer that are caught. So we're going to compare the number of deer that are tagged. Now, we can say the number of deer that are caught, but that could get a little bit tricky. So we know that a forest ranger has tagged 280 deer. That's clear. So we have 280 tags. And we know when we read it, later 405 deer are caught. That's not going to be very helpful because we're not sure where it goes, out of which 45 are tagged. Oh, well, we can figure out that 45 tagged has to go here. So now we have to figure out where our variable is going to go and where that 405 is. 45 are tagged out of the 405. So 405 deer have to go here because 45 are out of the 405. It's that part of our whole, which means we are looking at the total number of deer. And in this case, I'm going to use T and hope that y'all can read it okay. And so we get that T is going to be total. Now we can go ahead and solve our proportion. 45 times T equals 280 times 405. 45 T is equal to 113,400. We are going to divide that 113,400 by 45, and we find out that an estimated 2,520 deer are in the forest. So does that answer how many deer are in the forest? The answer is yes, at least as far as our estimate goes. All right, now let's take a look at number 4. The ratio of men to women taking a class is 6 to 5. How many women students are there if there are 6,600 people in the class? All right, let me first go ahead and say that is not all people sitting in a classroom. There are not 6,600 people sitting in a classroom. When you go to college, there could be 10 sections of a class that's offered, and 200 people could sit in each section, and that's how you get 2,000. The bigger colleges are going to offer more sections, the more popular courses are going to be offered, so that's how you get a number as big as 6,600. You also could think that it could be multiple colleges or multiple universities. So don't think that there's 6,600 people sitting in a classroom, because that is not what the question is referencing. So let's take a look at our units. We have men, we have women, and we have people. Okay? Now, you may have thought we have students, but if you notice, the adjective with students is women. So therefore, that's our unit, which is women. So we want to know how many women. So that's definitely going to be one of our units. Want to know how many women. And if we put the word men on the bottom, that's not going to be very helpful because that 6,600 isn't how many men there are. So we're going to compare women to people. And here's how we're going to figure this out. If there are 6 men and there are 5 women, we know this because of the ratio they gave us, men to women, 6 to 5. So we go in that order. We know that that would be 11 people because 6 plus 5 is 11. So 6 out of 11 are men. Therefore, 5 women are out of 11 people. And what we are being asked about is how many women are there out of 6,600 people. So we go about solving our problem. 11 times W, 5 times 6,600, giving us 11W equals 33,000, which we will want to divide the 33,000 by 11. And that gives us that we have 3,000 women. Now you may have noticed there's a relationship between 11 and 6,600. If you did, that's fine. You can go back to the way we did ratio tables and you can solve it that way. Either way, totally optional, your choice, whichever way you like better. Number 5, a yard of fabric costs $12.99. How much will 2 feet cost? Let's take a look at our units. A yard of fabric costs $12.99. How much will 2 feet cost? Uh-oh, this could be a problem. We have yards, money, and feet. Now we're asked how much it costs, so we know that we're going to have money, and we know that money comes first, so money goes on top. So what unit could we put in the bottom? We either have to convert yards to feet or feet to yards. Well, I happen to know that 1 yard, a yard is 1 yard. That happens to be 3 feet. So if 1 yard is 3 feet, we can compare money to feet now. So we know that a yard, which is $12.99, and a yard is equal to 3 feet. So when it says a yard of fabric costs $12.99, we can say that 3 feet cost $12.99. We want to know how much will 2 feet cost. So we can now go about and solve our problem. 3 times C equals $12.99 times 2. And you get 3C equals 25.98. C is going to be 25.98 divided by 3, and that gives us that the cost will be $8.66. Does that answer our question for how much will 2 feet cost? $8.66 makes sense. It answers our question. And now on to the last one. It takes about 20 minutes to grade a student's paper. How long in hours does it take to grade papers for a class of 25 people? This is a real-world problem for all of your teachers. So, let's find our units. It takes about 20 minutes to grade a student's paper. How long in hours does it take to grade papers for a class of 25 people? Well, when we look, we have minutes, we have people, we have hours. we're going to have to do some converting. The way that we converted 1 yard to 3 feet, we're going to have to do here. But before we can do that, we have to figure out the number of minutes. Because 20 minutes out of an hour is not a pretty decimal. It's a fraction of a third, which is repeating 3. So we're going to compare minutes to people. So it takes 20 minutes, so that has to go up top, to grade a student's paper. A student, that indicates one person. So you can put one student or you can put one person. And we want to know how long, so the number of minutes, to grade for a class of 25 people. So we go across, we cross multiply 1 times m and 20 times 25. 1 times m is 1m, 20 times 25 is 500, and we know that 1m is the same thing as m, so we get that it's 500 minutes. Well, in order to figure out the number of hours, we are going to have to say if there are 60 minutes in an hour, we have to take 500 and divide it by 60 because there's 60 minutes in an hour. This means the number of hours is 8 point repeated 3 hours. Make sure you have the bar over the 3.